So I asked the brothers and sisters on Zoom, don't we sound great? Thank you. I asked us to sing this song before we do the talk because that's the title of my talk. God is the source of my supply. Now, the three major challenges that traditionally bring people to new thought or unity are problems with health, relationships, and money. Health, relationships, and money. Now, I have struggled with financial prosperity most of my life, although it's taken me years to realize it's not about the money. It's not about the money. No, it's my thoughts and feelings about financial security that have given me fits. The truth is, I've always had enough to live comfortably and well. Even when I managed to get myself into a temporary hole by spending more than I took in, I still found appropriate ways to remedy the situation. But in all those circumstances, I just assumed that the issue was simply one of money, of my personal financial statement. I also assumed that my problems were mine alone to solve, that if I made a mess of things, it was my sole responsibility to redress those wrongs. This was only partly because I felt ashamed of myself for letting things get so out of control. Now, only in the last few years have I come to realize that my actual financial statement, the report of my actual prosperity, is in the bank of the divine presence. And because God is not only endless supply, but also endless love, I can always ask for help whenever I find myself fearful about my finances. And God will always faithfully deliver. God is the source of my supply. Period. There is no other. Not the economy, it's not the rate of inflation, it's not the money supply, it's not my pension fund, it's not my savings accounts or my IRAs, it's not government spending, it's not the cost of living, although these things all exist and play their role. No, these are merely external conditions over which I have relatively little control. And the truth is, I actually always have very little control over all external conditions. I don't just lack control over the financial world, I have no control over this pandemic. I have no control over government responses to the pandemic. I have no control over who gets vaccinated. I have no control over the effectiveness of the vaccines. I have no control over the disruptions these have brought to my life. I have no control over other people's feelings or opinions. I have no control over Twitter or Facebook or anything that gets said on social media. And as I thought about it, it's not just external circumstances over which I have no control. There are many internal conditions over which I also have no control. I cannot control aging, for example. I cannot control death. I cannot control disease. I cannot control my feelings and impulses. I often cannot control my thoughts. I cannot control my creative capabilities. The more I reflected on it, I thought the list of things over which I am powerless is practically endless. So if I only think about it this way, though, I have to acknowledge that I am one big mess of a human being. And as we say in the first step of the 12-step recovery work, I have to admit that I am powerless over the conditions of my life. But is that really true? Could it be I'm looking at this the wrong way? As we just sang, God is the source of my supply, ready, the good, to multiply, bringing the substance I require, filling my every deep desire. So my challenge as a human being convicted of the truth that there is only one presence, one power, one love, active in my life, active in the world today, is to feel this so deeply and completely that I can permanently let go of the compulsion to control anything and everything that I encounter. This letting go and letting God is the gateway to prosperity. And what is prosperity? Prosperity is a simple gift. It's a condition of having enough. Having enough of the means of living the lives we want to live. This sufficiency applies to us as individuals. It applies to us as a society. We do believe that in God, sufficiency prevails. There is always enough. I always have everything I need. And not just material needs. I always have enough to meet my emotional, my physical, my spiritual needs. The infinite substance that constitutes the divine presence means that there can never be a moment of lack or a failure of supply. This cannot happen. But while we can happily affirm this as an enduring principle in our conscious minds, our subconscious minds often have other ideas. I know mine does, because it faithfully and regularly, like Old Faithful in Yellowstone, throws up fears, doubts, criticisms, annoyances, all usually accompanied by some really unpleasant emotions and feelings. It's these feelings that can grab my attention and demand my focus, and once I'm caught up in them, I can easily get lost in a storm of negativity and depression. Just like that beeping car out there, it's so difficult to not get caught up when these things show up and grab our attention. Now, it's also difficult to remind ourselves that there's nothing wrong with this. It's our natural conditioning, and we have no control over it. But we can let go and let God apply His soothing balm to our troubled minds. Now, this requires me to always, every time I feel the storm coming on, turn my attention to God as best I can. For only in God can I find relief. Only in God can I be restored to equanimity, to peace. When I'm in the midst of intense fears or anger, I may not be able to focus with sufficient concentration. Kind of like with the beeping horn out there. The best I might be able to do is get a momentary reminder that God is in charge. But I suggest that that's enough. That's enough to invoke God's help. As Connie shared with us from Georgiana Tree West's book, The Prosperity's 10 Commandments, the first commandment is, you shall look to no other source but God for your supply. No other source but God for your supply. Everything I need is already present by virtue of the indwelling Christ. And the good news is that I'm always present in the kingdom of God. And the kingdom is always present in me. It is the work of my life, therefore, to align my thinking and the accompanying emotional vibration with this realization. Now, I don't know about you, but it's a fact that I need to learn this over again every day. Sometimes as if from scratch. When fear and doubt overwhelm my feeling body, it can seem as if everything I've learned and experienced from my years of spiritual practice can simply fly out the window. And I'm left feeling like a babe in the woods again. So Georgiana Tree West gets this. In her book, she observes, the fact that sometimes we learn much needed lessons through unhappy experiences, such as illness or poverty, does not make them right. The lesson is the hidden good in them that proves omnipresence, that we can never be separated from God and from God's good. Now, when I read these words, what I hear is that I can train my mind to overlook the crazy talk. For instance, the talk that I might run out of money, that inflation will cripple my ability to take care of myself. And I can use the occasion of this agitation, this crazy talk, to look past it to God's benevolence and care. Even if I have thoughts of poverty, she reminds us, I cannot, in fact, be separated from God's good. This is a spiritual impossibility. So my job is to ask God's help in shaping my thinking to conform to this powerful truth. God does not view our struggles and our error consciousness as something bad or deficient. No, He sees us only as His magnificent creations. God never criticizes, condemns, gets exasperated. God never rolls his eyes or sees anything wrong with us. As the words to one of our hymns say, God is love. That love surrounds us. In that love I safely dwell. 'Tis above, below, within me. God is love, and all is well. No, it's only in our underdeveloped human thinking that we hold judgmental thoughts about ourselves, our neighbors, our world. And this is a function of a universal process of the evolution of consciousness. For as we've said many times, we are born incapable of realizing the Christ that was born with us. It takes time, patience, effort, and humility to lift our thinking to a higher vibration. And so it's very important in the disciplining of our minds to treat ourselves with consistent compassion. This is God's way, and therefore it's a good way for us to follow. When I fall down, fail, forget, or even, as I admit, willfully refuse to take the higher road, I can start over at any subsequent point, and nothing is lost. I remain, no matter what I think or do, utterly one with God and God's good. The consciousness of this leads to remembering that I can rely on my oneness with God to help reshape my thoughts and feelings so that they now reflect God's abundance and supply. Ms. West makes this point clear. She says, the feeling of partnership with God, the feeling of partnership with God is essential to all successful living. First, we need to feel that God can be relied on to guide our thoughts and words and actions. Then, we must realize, that is to make real, that the same power that inspires us to do the right thing is the power that provides us with the necessary strength and ability to follow through. But the partnership does not end there. She says, after we have done everything we know how to do, we can safely rest from our labors, knowing that God carries on, and that when there is more work for us to do, it will be revealed to us. In other words, we do the work of disciplining our thoughts and feelings to the best of our ability. That is, we do our part. And we do this day by day, week by week, firm in the faith that even when the expected results do not materialize as soon as we want them to, change is indeed occurring. We have faith. Remember, St. Paul says faith is assurance of things hoped for, proof of things not seen. We have faith that God is multiplying our efforts in ways that we cannot know. So Miss West continues and says, when through our own gallant efforts, I love that, our gallant efforts, we have rid our minds of doubts and fears and are truly trusting in Him, we find that a seemingly chance word or contact is actually the next step in demonstration of the good we desire. And these things amaze us until we remember that while we have been resting, God has continued working through His immutable laws, and as a result has drawn into our lives whatever we need, as surely as the magnet draws iron filings. And so as I continue in my daily struggle to think divine thoughts and feel divine feelings, I humbly ask God to assist me in this work. And as He has never failed me in the past, so too He does not fail me now and will not fail me tomorrow. And so I can rely on this truth that as God gives to me, I can in equal measure give of myself. Just as I am a creator made in the likeness of my Creator, so too am I a lover made in the likeness of the absolute lover. And so too I am a giver made in the likeness of the eternal, never-failing benefactor. When we share our tithes and offerings in our Sunday service, remember we affirm, God is the source and I am the channel. God is the source, I am the channel. The way I understand this is that as there is no separation between God and me, so too there is no limit or directionality to prosperity. Good comes and goes, flows in and out, always, everywhere, as a law of divine mind. There is only good, and good is always in circulation. However, every time I fall into fear or doubt, I also block my felt connection to the circulation of the good. In fact, we could argue that fear and doubt are exactly how cutting ourselves off in consciousness from God and God's good feels. Fear and doubt are the feeling of cutting ourselves off from God's good in consciousness. And again, I say this not to condemn myself, but to remind myself of the truth hiding in my doubts and fears. I am always one with the divine, and I have the power to remind myself of this truth at any time. That's something I have control over. I also have the power to ask for help if I find that I am too frightened or distracted to do this work on my own. So while prosperity is the state of grace in which everything I need is always supplied, it is also a spiritual law in which I can consciously participate through acts of generosity and sharing of my good. The truth is that the I of me, the human of me, does not own my good. I own nothing. I am the recipient of good freely given by the Lord of my being. No matter how much of my treasure, time, or talent I give away, my storehouse of these riches is not diminished by a single measure. In the 6th chapter of Luke, Jesus makes this quite explicit. Give, he tells us, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over, poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. This power of reciprocity is baked into the fact that we are each an individualized expression of the absolute divine. God is prosperity, so I am prospered. God is generosity, so I am generous. But the manifestation of this divine state is in our behavior, not just our thoughts. It takes giving, as Jesus says, to receive in turn. We must first give to receive. Now, giving always starts with an act of faith. I give with no expectation of return. I need expect nothing because I already know that I need nothing. I need nothing because, as Jesus tells us, the very act of giving generates reciprocal receiving. They are the same. Your gift will return to you in full, Jesus says. I need nothing because I am always supplied. And as I am always supplied, so too are we all. This law is universal, which means no exceptions. So that means we can consider that as a ministry, we here at Capital City are too always supplied. From our first day almost 6 years ago, we have never gone wanting. We have, through the generosity of each of us, allowed God's prosperity to flow into the church, such that we are also able, as a church, to participate in the great circulation of good by giving financial support to Silent Unity and to the Fillmore Bible Project. But as I said at the beginning, it's never about the money. It's not about the money. It's always about the consciousness that God is the source of our supply. All demonstration of this is an acknowledgement and faith of this simple fact. So today, as we acknowledge this truth that we are always bathed in everything we need, both individually and collectively, and in recognition of our ministry's absolute prosperity, I and the board are asking you to give the money that you would normally give today to the ministry to someone or some other cause in need of your support. The church does not need your money. Let this be our common demonstration of our congregational prosperity. Let us give in love because we love to give. It's not who we give it to that matters. It's our willingness to let go and let God. It's our willingness to participate in circulation, period. And when we do this, we accept Jesus' promises that whatever we give to whomever we give it, it cannot but come back, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into our laps. So I invite us to take this truth in. We are always in prosperity because we are always in the kingdom. The kingdom has no limits. God's love has no limits. God's prosperity has no limits. And I invite us to bring this thought together to a close by singing once again, My Source. We'll just sing the first verse and the chorus, number 149. And let's feel this truth. Now let's feel these words. Let's feel God as the source of my supply. Shall we stand?